Okay, so here we go. Here is another video in my chatting with series, and this time we're going to be talking with coaches, and we'll be talking about the misconceptions of pupils when they come to coaches. We're talking about how the lockdown is going to affect what happens to squash afterwards. Now, unfortunately, the video stops a little bit prematurely because of the time limit on the recording software, so I apologise for that, but we managed to finish everything that we were saying. In addition, we've also agreed to do a part two where we carry on some of the topics that, well, not some of the topics that we didn't finish or we didn't even start in the agenda that I had. So look out for that in a couple of weeks. Anyway, let's get on with it. Hello and welcome to the second in my series of chatting with. Today we are chatting with coaches. Good morning, everybody.
Morning, Phil.
Morning.
All right, so what we're going to do, as we did last time, is we're going to go round the screen and people are going to introduce themselves. Lauren, why don't you start, please?
So I live in Essex. I was a professional squash player. I'm 25 plus another few years. I played professionally for about 7 years and reached the world number 34. And then I decided to stop playing squash and concentrate on coaching. Big influence was my dad, who's also on this call. Mm-hmm. And since then I've coached for 6 or 7 years. And recently, the last 3 years, I've been the Norwegian national coach for the men and the women and the juniors, which I think is a first for a woman to be coaching a men's national team. I work at the Off the Wall Academy in Colchester, mm-hmm. and we've got about 100 kids playing squash now, which is fantastic. And we have a successful schools program as well.
Excellent. Okay.
So yeah, enjoyed my coaching.
How does the Norwegian thing work? Do you travel like once a month or? So
it works out about once a month. I go over there, and I would go from a Friday to a Sunday night, doing different squads. It works out about once a month that I go there.
All right. Okay. Great. All right, Danny, who are you?
Hi, I'm a former international circuit player. Reached the top 30 in the world for a while in the 80s. Played against both Jahangir, Jansher, Dittmar and people like that, so quite experienced. I also then moved in and joined a club called St George's Hill in Weybridge. That job's expanded over the 31 years now, and in the meantime I've coached on several national junior squads and regional squads with Paul actually back in the 90s and early 2000s, and county coaching as well, and I've also coached several top pros who have done pretty well on the circuit over the years.
But do you want to name those people, or you'd rather not at this point?
Well, no.
Your choice.
No, I coached Tom Richards from the start when he was a kid up till he was 18, 19. And Joe Lee, my son, the same up till 18. Still working alongside Robert Owen with Charlie Lee, who's another one of my sons and pupils. And then people like Alex Ingham and others that reached, and Charles Sharps, I started all of those guys off as well. So excellent. Quite a lot of the kids that I started off and had junior careers did pretty well.
All right. And you're only working at St George's now?
Yes. Have only really been working there for a while.
Right. Which is a beautiful club. It's one of the only two places in the UK with a glass court. Is that right?
Yeah, we got the glass court in 2010. Mm-hmm. And in the PSL, and we've had the ability to stage fairly big tournaments. I think having the capacity of about 250 has meant that we've been able to have the events, and therefore the glass court, which was initially considered a bit of a white elephant at one point, has been well used, and it's a reasonable income getter for the club now. They even film TV shows and adverts on it sometimes, as well as people hire it out.
Yeah, okay. And not that long ago, you kindly let me go down there and have a hit on it, which was great fun. That was always cool.
Yeah.
All right. Excellent.
Yeah, I remember that.
All right, Paul.
Oh, where do I start? I'm not going to say how old I am. Way past it. I've been I've been playing since I was 12, so that's quite a long time. I've been coaching for about 30 years, and I've coached in a variety of places around Essex. I coach at the Off the Wall Academy, which Lauren sort of started up. Off the Wall actually came from something that Danny and I did many years ago, if Danny remembers, when we were trying to get a tournament on the beach in Brighton with Michael Harris. And we started up a company called Off the Wall, which seemed appropriate at the time. Mm-hmm. And then I sort of kept the name and we put it into the Squash Academy. And as Lauren said, we've got about 100 kids there working out of Colchester. And Lauren really is the lead coach. She does most of the work. I don't do very much at all. I also coach in Chelmsford as well. I've coached regional stuff with Danny and Mike Harris over the years for England Squash. I've done a couple of national squads back in the day when the kids were doing national squads up in Nottingham with John Milton, Annette Pilling. Vicky Botwright was on that squad, and so was Mark Challoner. I'm now doing some tutoring as well. I just finished the tutoring just before we had lockdown. I did a tutoring course in Bermuda, which was really nice for an old English player called Patrick Foster. So I did eight coaches in Bermuda and qualified them with England Squash level 1 and level 2. And previously to that, last year I did in Trinidad and Tobago. I did exactly the same. I did level 1 and level 2 courses for England Squash.
Just to clarify for viewers, tutoring means teaching coaches to be coaches.
Yeah.
So exactly. that's the proper term we use. A panel tutor. Do they still use panel tutor? Is that the phrase?
I don't think back in the day. I think you were a panel tutor, weren't you, Phil? So
I started on that process. Yeah, they're not called panel tutors anymore, are they?
No, they're just tutors now. So certain levels we got 1, 2, 3, and very occasionally there's not many level 4 courses.
Yeah.
So I'm able to deliver 1 and 2s at the moment, which is fine because there's not that many level 3 courses. And so I've done a couple here in the UK, but seem to be doing more abroad, which is
and nice places too. Trinidad, Tobago, Bermuda. It's the life, eh?
Well, you don't see much of them. Bermuda was a great example. I flew in on a Thursday, delivered Friday the level 1, level 2 on the Saturday and Sunday, finished at 5, and then they took me to the airport at 5:45. So that was basically it. I'm afraid it sounds great, but
it's not. No, you're right.
I do remember working a little bit work for you, Phil, at the Lansdowne Club.
Lansdowne Club, yeah. I was the coach there, and then I moved into the management, and I needed somebody, and you came in and took over from me.
It was great. It was great. So nice to be able to coach on the Bruce Court, which is a very famous court for people who don't know.
Exactly. Yeah. So again, for viewers who don't know, the Lansdowne Club is in central London. It's kind of the spiritual home of the British Open. It wasn't the very first place the British Open was held, but it was the place where it became really popular. And Jonah used to practice there, and the Khans used to. It's like very iconic. And the name of the court is the Bruce Court, and it had this wooden seating at the back. It was pretty iconic.
Very amazing.
Yeah. And I think Tim Garner's, he's not the coach there, but Tim Garner is like one of the main people there now as well. So, excellent.
So that's a brief history. I won't go on.
Right. And apparently you've got a son who plays a little bit as well, haven't you?
Which one, Elliot? Yeah, I got Daryl. And that's what got me into coaching, really, because I'd played for my club, and I'd played at a club for years and years and years, and played all through my 20s, 30s. And then we had Daryl, was our first son, and I decided to try and teach him to play. So at 4.5, he was able to sort of hit a ball quite well. And so I took him to the squash club, which was Bishop Stortford at the time, and just introduced him to squash. And then he joined in the juniors, and a lady there who got me on court said, "Can you come down and help me? I've got too many juniors today. You're a club player." So I went down on court, and it really started from there. So Di Langford, she was the one that got me on court, and I forever to this day thank her. And we take her out to lunch now and again, and I'm still in contact with her. So she was the one that dragged me on court. So Daryl obviously progressed to be not a bad little player. 37 years old now, and his son, oldest son Noah. I'm now coaching Noah, which is my oldest grandson. So,
wow.
And I keep telling him he's actually better than his father was at the time. Lauren will endorse that as well.
No pressure.
No pressure. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
All right then. So let's get on with the show, as it were. So Lauren, what do you think would be the most common misconception when a player comes to you, not particularly juniors or an elite player? A person comes in and says, "I'd like coaching." What kind of misconceptions have they normally got about the process or the results?
I think quite often they may feel like they're going to suddenly become a superstar overnight, and it's sort of drilling it into their head that it's a very long process. I often say, one of the common things I say to people when they first start is Rome wasn't built in a day, because they want to be successful straight away. They want to be the top junior in the country. They see other kids at our academy who've maybe reached that level, and they think after a few lessons under like rankings, and we all know how much hard work goes into being successful and being able to play squash at a high level. And that's one of the things I find often is maybe not always from the kids, but from the parents who desperately want their children to succeed at a sport and then start, and then it's sort of bringing that expectation down, I think is something that I experience quite a lot. Maybe not as much as people in other sports would experience, sports that are more high profile and have more money involved, and the parents are maybe getting their kids into that sport for different reasons.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I would find. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
expectations. They got very high expectations about how quickly they'll progress. And I mean, I'm not sure about your circumstances, but do you coach regular club players as well, not just juniors?
I used to. I've worked at different clubs. So I've worked at 3 different squash clubs. And I did coach quite a few adult members. But now I hardly coach any adults, because we basically only have sort of junior players at our academy. I coach a handful.
Okay.
Of players, yeah.
All right. Okay. Danny, misconceptions.
Well, weirdly, I agree with Lawrence. Often the parents have the misconceptions in the early days, but we don't have so much of that at St George's. Most people now come to me on recommendation. They've seen me coach, or they know. So most people are coming in knowing what they're gonna get. An adult or junior, whatever standard, they're sort of in it for the long run and just love the game. So and then anything else is a bonus. So lately, I don't know whether it's education or what, but there's been quite a bit of realism with people coming in. And I wouldn't have said people are getting overly disappointed. Hopefully, they're improving fairly fast and reaching their own personal goals. Okay. I think it's important. One important thing that a coach can do is set expectations at the beginning and set kind of realistic goals for a pupil without doing it necessarily too formally in the early stages.
Yeah, I remember a time somebody came to me and she was quite young and she wanted to play squash because she wanted to get fit. And she said to me, and she wasn't a very fit person to begin with, she says, "How long will it take me to get fit?" And I was quite young when I was coaching then, and I made the mistake of being honest with her. And I said, "It's going to take you a year to get fit, from nothing to a year." And she only came a couple of times because I scared her. And what I should have said, and I realise that now, is you'll begin to notice a difference in a couple of weeks. And I kind of set the expectation of this year, and it scared her. And she didn't really come out. And you're right, it's about setting the right expectations. I'm not saying we need to lie to people, but sometimes we need to manipulate the information in a way that that sets those expectations. And if she'd have realised, sorry,
not only do we learn coaching tricks and shortcuts to getting people better and ways to do lessons that are better, but we also learn verbal tricks and things that we've said, some things that we've just kind of blurted out at the beginning, which we'd never say now. And you know, whether that's an expectation thing or a coaching thing, just learn these.
A communication thing. I mean, I'm not wrong. It can take a year to get fit, but it was the wrong thing that she didn't need to hear that. So you're right. Set those expectations. What about you, Paul? Any thoughts?
I agree both with a lot of what Danny and Lauren said. I think it's easier to coach a beginner adult who are just starting off in the sport, and their expectations are much lower, so they're just happy to be able to improve, and their improvement is so much sharper and steeper than taking on a junior who's already ranked, you know, high up in an age group, who then wants to change coach. And the expectation is that they are not doing well enough with their previous coach, and they expect you to be able to do a magic trick and make them so much better than what they were getting before. And it's trying to make sure that those people understand that expectation is not really founded. Is that you've changed coach, but it doesn't mean you're going to suddenly become, you know, the British champion or whatever. So managing expectations, it's managing the expectation of the parents, as Danny said, and Lauren. But also managing on a very honest basis an expectation with a performance player of what you think between you can achieve, because it's a partnership. It's one doesn't work without the other. If it doesn't gel, it ain't going to work. You know, so I found that over the years, and there's some players are so much easier to coach than others. Yeah. Some people are more receptive than others.
Teachability.
I've been very lucky. I mean, I've coached a lot of England #1, both male and female juniors, and they are so different that you have to be a coach that's like a chameleon. You have to change depending on who you coach.
Yeah.
You cannot have the same. You know, coaches need to learn that you cannot be the same person every time you coach someone. You have to change. Even if you're doing 8 lessons in a row, it's really mentally tough at the end of the day. You go home really tired, not physically, but mentally, because you've had to change, which might be the same lesson you delivered, but in a completely different way each time. Yeah. So the expectations also come on our side as a coach. What do we expect to be able to achieve for that person? It's not just the expectations of the player. It's our expectations as coaches as well.
I remember years ago, a guy came to me. He was overweight, smoking in the bar, drinking a lot, and came to me for his first lesson. And he said, the first thing I need to tell you is, and he was about 40, I don't want to be a champion. I tried to keep a straight face. It's like, why are you telling me that? Because my first question was, what do you want from me? And he said, well, I thought all coaches want to make players champions. It's like, that's not what I want. I want what you want. If you want to be a champion, I'll do my best to help you. If you just want to improve a little bit, I'll do my best to do that as well. Yeah, but great. That was one of those expectations that all coaches want to make people's champion. And of course, it's not particularly true. You know, coaches, as you say, you've got to be a chameleon. We've got to change based on who we are. And I made a video a couple of weeks ago about 5 things you should know before you get coaching. And one of them is that there is no perfect coach for anybody. As you said, it's about gelling. You've got to find the right coach with the right mentality, the right work ethic for what you want. And too often it's like, oh, this is the best coach. No, there is no best coach. There's somebody who works well with me. And you're right, a great coach will adapt his or her style to suit the players, the squad, the situation. That's really true.
In saying that, though, you've got someone like Malcolm Wilstrop, who's obviously one of the best coaches in the world, who sticks rigidly to his philosophy, and it's obviously worked for him. So I think sometimes an old school version does work, but I think that's quite rare these days. Yeah. I don't think there's many potential Malcolm Wilstrops in terms of their coaching ability out there that can do it exactly the same way as he did all the way through the years and produce all those players like Robinson, Beach Hill. There's such a long list. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I don't think that's possible anymore. I don't know what you think, Danny.
Well, Malcolm's unusual because he's got this aura and always has. There's always that authoritarian friendly but fear factor that you've got, and you go in with a lot of respect, and you just do a lot of what he says, I presume. But it's certainly worked, and he's obviously a very, very interesting coaching character to analyse. But he's definitely out of the box in the way he coaches. But the results are fantastic. I mean, one of my first national squads, I went on with him, and he didn't really say much, and yet I came away hitting the ball better than I'd ever hit it. So there was something there.
But I mean,
amazing.
Malcolm, we're talking about, again, for viewers who don't know, we're talking about Malcolm Wilstrop, who's the father of James, and I forgot his brother's name.
Christy from my era.
Christy, yeah, okay.
Christy was a rival of mine as a junior and a young senior.
Now
he was pretty good.
Yeah, now he's up in Pontefract in Yorkshire, and I've met Malcolm and spent time with Malcolm a long time, but I don't know whether he coaches regular club players. What we're really talking here is juniors. That approach might work very well for juniors, but if he were to come to a regular club, I don't know whether that approach would be as successful. I don't know. I'm not saying it isn't. I'm just questioning. I'm agreeing with you, but it's a very specific case. It's juniors and elite juniors. I don't know. Lauren, what do you think?
I think it maybe depends on the adults and what they want from this. I've met quite a few adult players who are desperate to succeed on the Masters Tour and are very dedicated and train almost like the juniors do. And I think they would probably respond to Malcolm and his methods quite well.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, there's club players who just want to hit with coach and they want to be run ragged and all they want is to come off and have had a bit of social interaction and feel like they've had a sweat for 40 minutes. And I'm not sure that he would really engage well with them. And I know as well he can go on individually with people.
Yeah.
So those who are looking for a bit of a more social sort of aspect, maybe he would work with them.
Yeah. Okay.
That well.
All right, let's move on before we turn it into the Malcolm Wilstrop critique.
Yeah.
All right, so the next point I want to talk about is the challenges facing coaches. Now, when I first thought about this particular point, I wasn't really thinking about the lockdown situation, but we have to talk about that. And I suppose, what do we think will be the challenges for coaches in the next 6 months or a year? Why don't you carry on with that, Lauren? What do you think?
I think maybe a bit of fear of going on court, being close to someone. I actually think it's going to be a bit of a problem for people. And obviously squash is in quite a closed environment and you're sweating and I think
touching
people worry about
the walls.
that. All of that stuff. I think they're going to be wary of going on court. I think for those who are at elite level, I think they're going to be petrified that they're far behind and that they've lost all the things that, all the skills that they'd learned and the fitness that they got to. And I think they'll be desperately clawing to try and get that back and worried that they're not going to get that back. I know I've got a few juniors who've said that to me, and you have to sort of reassure them that it won't take them long to, get their sharpness back. And as long as they're keeping fit, then that's often the hardest bit.
Yeah.
I think that will be the fear for people is that they're not going to be as good as they were before.
All right. Okay. All right. Paul, what do you think?
I think we're going to find it difficult to start with about how we approach, how we set our coaching styles, how we set our squads. But I think because coaches are so adaptable, I think it won't take long for us to work out the best way to sort of use the situation depending on what we're told we're allowed to do. For example, if we've got squads, I mean, Lauren and I sometimes have squads of 20 odd people on 5 courts, then we know 4 to a court, that's not going to work. So we're going to have to be quite inventive and maybe split the squads in half and then so we only have 2 on a court.
Yeah.
So it's not rocket science. I think we can do it. And I don't worry particularly about players worrying about whether they've lost their sharpness, their edge, their fitness, because everybody's done the same. So we're all starting from a level base. So I don't think anyone's got to worry about worrying that somebody else is better than them, because they've had to stop as well. So it's just like restarting again from being frozen in time. So I think as coaches, because we've been adaptable, you know, like suddenly you've got 20 juniors on 5 courts and suddenly a court's taken away and you've only got 4. We have to adapt.
Yeah.
So I think this situation shows that we are very adaptive, and I think that's not going to be a problem. It's just going to take a little bit of time to just rejig, really. That's all.
Danny?
Yeah, well, I agree. We nobody really knows how we're going to come back until we get the guidelines, and I think it will be an evolving process. With regard to the kids, I think the kids and the young pros and that have been very inventive about what they've been doing in the lockdown, and they've been volleying in the garden. Sometimes if they've luckily locked with somebody who could also play, like a brother or a girlfriend or whatever. And I think the ones who've been the most inventive may have a bit of a head start, and the ones who've kept their physical training going well. With regard to coaching, until we know what the rules are, it's hard to tell. There'll be a lot more, maybe initially there'll be a lot more solo practice and only 2 on a court with certain drills that you can't actually go near each other, and then it will evolve. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I mean, I don't coach on court anymore. My circumstances don't allow me, but I'm a very tactile coach. When somebody's working on something, I want to go up and I want to, move their arm and put their leg in position, So if I were to have to go back on court now, I'd have to be, I'd find that difficult because of the way I like to, to be with my pupils on court. So there's that. Another thing I was also thinking was about how people will go back. I mean, do we think that people will just suddenly, once people say, I mean, I know we've said it depends on what we're allowed to do, but once people say you're allowed to go back on court, do you think there's just going to be this mad panic rush to get back on court? Paul, what do you think about that? Or do you think people will just say, I don't know?
No, I think there's going to be a load of diehards that actually will break the rules. I just think that they're so desperate to get back on court. The people who've been playing for years and years, that they'll initially go on there with a view to playing games that doesn't, that was distancing by the 2 meters, if that's the rule, and end up, so come on, mate, let's have a game. Come on, it doesn't matter, does it? We're only 2 of us. And I think there's going to be a very difficult policing of the situation to enforce any rules that we've got. So I think we've got a challenge, not so much in when we go back. It's a case of challenging to see if the rules that are laid down are going to be kept, and it's down to club owners, I suppose, to try and enforce it. They've just got to rewrite the rules. I mean, we've never been in this situation before, so I think the rule book's got to be just rewritten completely, and we've got to try and support the clubs and make sure that people are doing what they're supposed to be doing, which is going to be very difficult. It might even alienate us with some people who say, "Come on, let us do it." So I think we just got to tread very carefully. That's my view.
Yeah, I mean, part of me wants to suggest to all club owners that we only allow 20-minute bookings once we start, instead of the 40-minute or the hour. Just because part of me worries that people are going to get injured. They're not going to warm up or heat up properly. They're just going to stay, as you say, oh, come on, this drill is boring. Let's play. And they haven't played for 2 months. And there's going to be a lot of back injuries, a lot of hamstring, a lot of beginner's bum. There's going to be a lot of people the day after where they're in trouble. So maybe if we said you only can book 20 minutes, more people can play in the same period of time, so you keep more people happy. I don't know. Lauren, do you think that's a viable option for club owners?
It's tricky. I mean, we sort of looked at the information that US Squash had put out, and they'd gone the other way, whereas they'd made the time long each court to allow for the players to come off, for them to clean the whole courts, for them to then get out before the next lot come in. Because obviously if you've got 20-minute slots, there's a lot of people coming in and out of an area pretty quick. But I agree with Paul about the die-hard squash players.
Yeah, it's true.
Because as we all know, squash is addictive. And people will be missing that adrenaline buzz that they get from playing squash. And I just don't think they'll be able to help themselves. They'll just get dragged into wanting to play. I think that's a bit of a worry. I don't know how clubs are going to police it. Really not sure. But yeah, like Danny said, I think we have to wait for the guidelines of what we are actually allowed to do. Because the guidelines in Norway that they've just brought out are quite extreme of what they're allowed to do. So they have to stay 2 meters apart. Only one of them is allowed to touch the ball at any time. And only one person is allowed to open the door. And no one is allowed to use the change room or the showers.
But that sounds pretty sensible to me. I mean, a friend of mine's about to play golf next week and he lives in the UK and they're not allowed to go into the clubhouse or use the change rooms, Danny. I mean, for a club like yours, that's going to be difficult. For maybe juniors coming in and going out, okay, but a club?
Yeah, we've got we have actually got a separate door. We could isolate the squash section. I agree with Lauren, make the sessions medium long, clean in between, only allow people in who book the court. Maybe start with people living in the same house because there's no reason why they can't play, or solo practice slots.
It's a fair point. Yeah.
Another answer. Weirdly, you can do a lot of coaching exercises on a one-to-one if you book a lesson where the person goes nowhere near the ball. Yeah. As you say, only one person picked the ball up. But I think we're going to have a problem with the other sports coming back, and quite rightly before squash. But possibly one of those that shouldn't necessarily come back that quickly is football, where they're going to be in close contact. And that's looking like a likely one that will start. Yeah. So people are tackling each other and within each other's body zones, literally. Then, if they're allowed back, then there's going to be a case for allowing other things. And I think it's these murky lines that being drawn, whether that's risk behaviour or what the expectation actually is, and I think that will apply to coming back in the various sports. But again, feel our way and let's see what happens.
I mean,
there are ways like, yeah.
I mean, that's why I'm
won't
sure.
apply to St George's, weirdly.
Sorry, say again, Danny.
Well, it won't really apply to St George's because the people have either renewed their subscriptions or not. So there's not a court for standard squash fraternity have renewed pretty well.
Yeah. What I mean about the football though is we're giving mixed signals. As you say, you're saying to squash players you've got to stay 2 meters apart. But then football, they're allowed to be touching each other because they'll be tackling, they'll be right on top of each other. And this is money, though, isn't it? This is billions of dollars. But our squash, nobody really cares about squash. So it's the mixed signal to the public. And as Paul said, you're going to get these diehards who say, oh, football players are allowed to go out and play. Why can't we? It's a fair point about being in the same household, though. I mean, if you're already in the same household, why can't you play squash? So it's going to be an interesting time in the next few months. You don't have a date yet for any of your facilities to reopen, do you?
No, I think it's going to depend on tomorrow, isn't it, as well? What Boris is making an announcement tomorrow. So
I think hospitality and sport will be the last things that open up. I think that we're looking September, October sort of time, I would say.
Yeah.
In realistic terms, we're not looking for anything that's before the end of the summer holidays.
Yeah. I'm sure I read somewhere on Twitter yesterday that somewhere in the UK, they were going to open on the 12th of June. I must have misunderstood.
Switzerland are opening squash facilities on the 11th of May, I think. So it'll be interesting.
Again,
we might learn from other countries' models what's working.
Yeah. But when you read down, I mean, I read the Swiss report, and same with a lot of them. The US squash is the one that Lauren cited. There is very draconian rules that they might be open to squash, but again, it's either solo practice or routines based on, and they've given a whole lot of routines for 2 people practices where you do not get near each other. So there is squash courts opening. Interestingly, I did a racquetball course in Sweden just before we locked down, and Sweden has continued to play squash the whole time.
Well, there you go. I hope that was useful or enjoyable for you. Links to all of the coaches' websites and Facebooks and places like that are in the text description, so go and learn about them if you want to. Okay, well, there you have it. Hopefully that was enjoyable. As I mentioned in the introduction, look out for a part 2 in a couple of weeks. If you've got any questions for those coaches, feel free to put them in the comments, and I'm sure that they will answer them. And if not, I'll do my best to answer them as well. On the screen at the moment is a subscription button. If and only if you think my content is useful, please consider subscribing. There's also a playlist of the other Chatting With videos and another video that YouTube thinks is a good fit for you based on what you've been watching. And remember, do something every single day to improve your squash. See ya.